Welcome. I'm Carl Frederick, and I will be interviewing individuals for Kenosha Voices, an oral history project of the Kenosha County Historical Society in conjunction with Kenosha Community Media. I have worked in newspapers for more than 40 years as an editor and a reporter. 38 and a half of those years were at the Kenosha News. I am also a member of the Kenosha County Historical Society Board. We hope you enjoy these programs. I'm speaking with Frank Picazo and Ralph Abrego, descendants of the first Mexican family to settle in Kenosha. Thank you for joining me today.
You're welcome.
Tell me about how your family came to be in Kenosha.
Well, the Perez's and the Garcias were born in San Sebastian, the state of Jalisco in Mexico. They left because my grandfather worked in the silver mines, and he was told by his doctor to get out of the silver mine. So they bought a dry goods store. But the revolution was going on, and the soldiers with their horses and guns would go into the store and take what they wanted. I'd give my grandfather a chit, telling him this is due when it's...
Kind of an IOU.
Yeah. You could claim that when the revolution was over. He didn't buy that at all. So they decided they were going to leave for the United States. They left my grandfather and his family and my grandmother and her brother Fermin. They went to San Antonio. They stayed in San Antonio, I don't know how long, and then they went north to Lovell, Wyoming, where they bought a little farm and they were raising soybean, beans, pinto beans, I forget what other crops. But in that farming in those days, small farms, you'd have good years and bad years. They liked it, but the good years drove them out of it. The bad years did. They went back to San Antonio, back into Mexico. I don't know how long this took and how long they were gone. But they ended up going back to Wyoming.
And what year was this, roughly? 1915, 16?
The 20s, I'd say the late teens. Yeah,
Okay.
probably the late teens of the 1900s. And they somehow, they heard rumors of a good place to go would be to Wisconsin, Kenosha, Wisconsin, because there were a lot of factories there, a lot of places to get jobs. So my grandfather's brother, Joe Garcia, he went to Kenosha, Wisconsin, looked, checked around, decided it was a nice place to move to. Went back to Wyoming, says, let's go to Wisconsin. So they moved to Wisconsin. My grandfather got a job working on the Chicago and Northwestern Railroad, and my great uncle, my grandmother's brother, he got a job working on the Chicago and Northwestern Railroad. As far with my other uncles and aunts, where they got jobs, I don't know, you know. Now this is what was told to me. I wasn't even born yet. This is what was told to me.
Okay, and you had a great uncle that also moved here?
Yes, that was, the great uncle was my grandmother's brother.
Okay.
He married my grandfather's sister.
Okay.
And my grandmother, Margarita Perez, married my grandpa,
Okay.
Julian Garcia.
All right, and so where did they live? What part of Kenosha did they live in?
I don't know where they lived when they first came to Kenosha. I don't know how long they lived here before they bought that house at 1310 65th Street. I don't know.
Okay.
They had that home there before I was born. I know that, you know.
So when did you go to school? Or let's talk about your father. Now, your father came at some point,
Yes.
okay,
I don't remember the date of when he
and
came.
married your mother.
Yeah. I think he was 17 or 18. I'm not quite sure on those dates.
And where did they live?
I think when they got married, they lived at 1310 65th Street. It was a big house. They utilized every bit of the rooms in that house. The basement, in the summers when it was so hot, no air conditioning in them days, they'd move into the basement. Otherwise, they lived in the first floor, and they had the second floor, and they even utilized the attic. Sometimes they took in room and boarders, you know. So they utilized everything.
How many were in the family?
Well, let me think now. My great aunt, her name was Casimira.
How many kids were there?
I think they had 4 I know of for sure. You want the names?
No, that's up to you.
They had four daughters and 4 sons. They did well. The four daughters all married. Their husbands were good men, hard-working people. Their one son worked for the Chicago Northwestern also. He was the ticket master for the office there, and his son eventually worked for the railroad too and became the ticket master when he was my second cousin when he retired.
When did your father, or why did your father decide to leave Mexico? Because he came from a different place.
Right, he was born on Rancho Las Palmas, which was owned by my grandfather. It was a huge place. My grandpa used to say you could ride a horse in any direction from the main house here, and for 24 hours to still be on his property. Well, ranching is not an easy job. You got to work every day. My dad told me I didn't like that. I didn't like that at all. He says, I could see these purple mountains in the distance. He said, I wanted to see what was on the other side of those purple mountains. So he left the ranch, went to San Juan de los Lagos, where he met up with other people, young men, saying, we're going north. So he said, well, I'll go with you. Going north, he eventually ended up in Kenosha. And that's how he came to the city of Kenosha. And that's where he went back to when they deported him. He went back to Rancho Las
And he stayed there then? He never came back?
Never came. He tried, but my mom tried to get a hold of she contacted the senators and congressmen, and they give her the same answer. He's got to go through the real process like everybody else. Well, that takes years and years.
How many brothers and sisters do you have?
Do I have?
Did you have in the family?
At that time, there were 7 of us, 4 boys, 4 girls, 3 boys. But then when my mother divorced my dad, she met Ralph's father, and they married, and they had 3 children. Ralph's my brother, Sam's my brother, and Sarah's my sister. So there were 10 of us born to my mother. There were actually 11, because I had a sister that died in infancy. I was just a little myself before school days and all that.
So where did you go to school?
Well, I went to about every school in the city of Kenosha. Kindergarten at Frank School, because St. James did not have a kindergarten. So I went to St. James. For 3 years, we moved, which we did a lot of back in the 1930s, because we didn't have money, you know. Then I went, from St. James, I went to Grant School. From Grant School, I went to Jefferson School. From Jefferson School, went to Roosevelt School. Then from Roosevelt, I went to Columbus. Not for a full year, though, just a partial year. From there, I went to McKinley Junior High School. I stayed at McKinley Junior High School for almost 3 years, and I went to finished ninth grade at Lincoln Junior High School. Lincoln Junior High School, I went down to the high school, so that's a lot of schools I went to.
Were there any other Mexicans in school when you were there?
No. All the years that I went to school, and I went to all those schools, never bumped into another Mexican boy.
This was all late 30s, in the 30s when
This
this
was all in the 30s, yes. Well, even on into the 40s, you know. My high school graduation class was 1949. I didn't make it. I had 11 years of education. I had a belly full of it, you know. The thing that set me off, I had an English teacher. I had no use for him. He gave out books. One day he says, okay, this is what I want you kids to do, blah, 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 blah. He never gave me a book. So next day we come back in, collects all the books, wanted our reports. He says, Gregory, where's your report? I said, well, I don't have a report. I said, I didn't have a book. Well, why didn't you get it from one of the other students? I said, well, that's not my job to get a book from the other students. It's your job to supply me with a book. Leave the room, he says. So I went into the library. You're not supposed to be able to walk into the library unless you have a note. I walked in, got away with it. Next day I go back. He says, why didn't you go to the office like I told you? I said, you didn't tell me to go to the office. You told me to leave the room, and I left the room. He said, go to the office. I went to the office. That was the reason that I quit school right there. I thought, if I'm going to be treated like this, I don't want no part of this. I had 11 years of education. That, as far as I was concerned, that was more than enough. I was a good student. I learned an awful lot. I didn't have the degree.
What did you do after that?
Well, I got a job working at the Coca-Cola, the bottling plant on Sheridan Road. On Sheridan Road. I worked there for a year. My straw boss was a kid, 24-year-old man. His name was Reinhold Neumiller. He was from the Neumiller Farms in Summer, a well-known family. He was a veteran of the Second World War. He was going to enlist again, and I said, oh, I'll go with you. He said, no, you won't. You're too young to go in there. He was killed in Korea on the 15th day of September of 1950. I always.
Okay, and then you went into the service at some point, did you?
Yes, I left. When I turned 18, I got a job working at Nash. My boss at Coca-Cola said, oh no, stay here. I'll give you a raise. I was making 35 cents an hour. I'll give you a raise to 65 cents an hour. I said, they're going to pay me $1.25, and it would be foolish for me to stay here.
And how long were you there?
I stayed there for a year. And I went down to the post office. I wanted to enlist into the Coast Guard. I liked the idea because I used to watch some Coast Guard men walk their post on the bridge at that time, or on the pier. At that time on the pier was a catwalk. And I used to talk to them guys. I thought, boy, you guys got the life. I went down there. Coast Guard man says, young man, the Coast Guard is not accepting applications at this time. Come back in about 6 months. And the Marine recruiter was there. It was a Thursday. I know that because that was the only day of the week that he was there. Put his arm on me. He got me. So I reported to Parris Island in January of 1950.
Then you were discharged In when?
January 1954, yes.
Right. Then what did you do?
Then I went back to work for Nash Motors again. I worked for 2 weeks, 4-day weeks. This was in 1954. It was hard times then. It was like a little recession, you know. So I worked there I was laid off till September. They called me back in September, and I worked there till I got married in June 16th of 1956. My wife's father owned his own glass business. And sometimes he'd come and ask me if I'd help him, and I did. One day he said, "Would you like to work as an apprentice in the glazing trade?" I said, "I sure would." So I worked as an apprentice. I worked in the union glazing trade for 40-some years, 41 years, I think it was. I retired at the age of 67. That was 26 years ago.
Okay.
I've been retired a long time, you know.
So when you went to school, were you already speaking English or were you speaking Spanish?
I never learned to speak Spanish. My parents, they decided amongst themselves that they would speak only English to their children. But they spoke English and Spanish to themselves. I thought that was a mistake later on, you know, because all my cousins, they all spoke both languages fluently, you know. They both spoke Spanish and English. And I thought, well, why didn't we learn that way? But the only one I think that really learned the language and spoke it fluently was my sister Ines, my older sister. She's 65 years old now. But she used to say, "I'm never going to marry a Mexican man." So what did she do? She married a Mexican man.
So when did you start seeing other Mexican families or individuals in your youth?
Well, I think the first time was Wesley Andrade's children. Yeah, and of course my cousins. They all spoke perfect English, but they understood it and spoke Spanish too. You know, my second cousin. These were all my ma's first cousins. My second cousins, they all spoke perfect English, and they did good in life. I had my one cousin, she was an honor student all the way through school, went to college, finished college, became a teacher. Her name was Yolanda Perez.
Okay. Ralph, when did you enter the picture? Where do you fit in with the family?
Well, I was born in 1952, and I had my brother Sam and my sister Sarah. They were born before me, and they were the children of my father's Gustavo Abrego, and he was killed in a car accident 6 months before I was born. So my mother was pregnant for 3 when he was killed. Okay, so then I was brought up. My mother was able to purchase a small house on 68th
24th.
68th Street, 24th Avenue, with insurance money that she was able to get from the accident that my father was in.
Okay, so when you were born, there were 3 of you, children.
Right.
Were you living with the Picazo's siblings?
Yeah, they bought this tiny little house, so it was just a small 2-bedroom place, and I don't think we all lived there all together at one time, but over time it was like
Ines was gone.
yeah, over time it seemed like some of them were there sometime and others were already gone. And
You said it was a tiny house. How many
yes,
bedrooms?
2.
And as many as 10 kids and parent?
No.
Not all at once.
Okay.
For instance, he was in the Marine Corps, so he wasn't there, and
It was a house full.
yes.
Well, if I may interject, before that, we lived quite a while at 6225 7th Avenue.
Right.
Remember that?
Yeah. That
Lived
house
there
is
quite a
gone now.
while.
It's the Imperial House now.
And you went to school where then?
Started out kindergarten at Columbus, and after kindergarten, I did 1 to 8 years at St. Mark's.
Okay. Now, did you have any other Mexican families at St. Mark's when you were going to school there?
No.
You were the only one.
Yes.
You knew it.
Yes.
Okay. And did more Mexican families come to live in Kenosha and go to St. Mark's?
Well, word must have gotten out that there was a Mexican family there, and it seems to me that today it is a predominantly Mexican church.
So by the time you left St. Mark's, there were other Mexican families there?
Not when I left.
Not
It
when
must
you
have
left.
come afterwards.
And you left when? 19...
I think I graduated in '66.
Okay. And then what did you do?
Then I went to Lincoln Junior High School for a year, and then the rest of my high school was at Tremper.
Okay. When you were growing up in this neighborhood near St. Joseph High School, were there a lot of other kids in the neighborhood?
Yeah, we were all the baby boomers, so there was tons of kids.
What ethnicities do you remember?
Polish, German,
Italian?
Italian.
A mix of all
Oh
different.
yeah.
And everybody got along.
Yep.
There were no issues between ethnicities or...
No. We were just kids. We hung out. We played a lot of baseball, football, and there was so many kids we were able to make two baseball teams.
And then what did you do after high school?
I went to school at UWM for a year. Then I went to Parkside for a year. Then I decided I wanted to go to Gateway to go into their law enforcement.
Okay. And did you have a job at that time as well?
I was working part-time security at St. Catherine's Hospital, and while I was working, going to school, St. Catherine's offered me a full-time job in the middle of the semester, so I had to quit school, take on the full-time job, and once I got my hours all straightened out, I went back to school, and at that time I applied for a job at the Kenosha Police Department. And right in the middle of the semester again, they offered me a job. So I had to quit school again. So after I was on the department for a year, they wouldn't allow you to go to school during that 1 year. Then after my year was up, I went back to school and finally got my degree.
Okay, and then you worked at the police department until retirement?
Yes.
What did you do there?
I worked second shift at first, and then I went to first shift for 10 years, I believe.
As a patrolman?
I was in patrol, and during that time I worked as an accident investigator, pistol instructor, physical fitness instructor, and then I was promoted to detective.
Okay. And what did you do as a detective?
Initially I was in open cases, and then after a year in that field, I went to the fraud unit, and I worked in there for 10 years.
And you retired then in
2008.
2008. Did either of you experience any kind of what you might call prejudice or discrimination growing up in Kenosha? You in the 30s and the 40s, and then you later in the 50s and the 60s? Did you ever experience any problems?
I think I told you, no, I didn't. I can't remember anybody Because in them days, you know, the neighborhood kids were all together. You were all friends, you know. But one time in the schoolyard, over a soccer game, I took the soccer ball away from the kid, and he called me a dirty Mexican. Well, I turned right around and hit him right in the nose. A lot of blood. So we're in front of the principal, Miss Keating. She asked me what happened, and I told her. She said, well, you're not allowed to hit him. I said, he's not allowed to call me a dirty Mexican. I said, he can call me a Mexican anytime he wants, but he cannot call me a dirty Mexican. She said, well, you're still not allowed to hit him. I said, well, if he calls me a dirty Mexican, I'll hit him in the nose again. She didn't like that. She said, well, we'll see about that. So that was the end of it. And the kid was a kid in the neighborhood, kid that I knew, you know. No bad feelings after that. After a couple of months, nobody's mad at each other no more. That's the only time I can ever remember anybody giving me any racial epithets and stuff like that.
Did you have any experiences?
No.
Okay. So how do you feel about how Kenosha treats Mexicans, Hispanics today?
You know, how I tell my wife, every so often they publish the list of the honor rolls. I said, Mexican, 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 all down the line. They start right out with Spanish names. I mean, they're in there lickety-split. I told her, these are the children of the Mexican people that have come here in the last 15, 20 years. They're making a name for themselves. They're doing good in school. That's what the way I think things are for the Mexican people now. They're finding jobs. They're doing whatever they want. You look in the paper, half the businesses you see are Spanish names. I don't care what the business name. There's a Spanish name. Got their own business. They work. They're hard-working people.
Yeah. You see them being successful, and
that's what they came to this country for.
And the city welcoming them and
right.
allowing them to do these, do what they want to do.
Right.
And your experience, your feelings?
Pretty much the same. A lot of my family, I think they all did really good when they got here. All my brothers and sisters, they were all successful. They all did pretty well.
Okay, and what do you attribute the hardworking spirit of your family and how you grew up and became successful? What do you attribute that to?
I would say it starts in the home. My mother was very strict with us. We always had to do chores, you know, we had to do dishes every day, take turns. One day you'd be the washer, and the next day you'd be the dryer, and then the next day you'd get a day off. And my mother always made us do chores every Saturday. We'd have to vacuum and dust, and she didn't just make you vacuum. You had to move all the furniture out to the middle of the room so you could clean it against the walls and the woodwork, and she was very strict with us.
How about her approach to your education?
Well, she wanted us to have a good education. That's why she did what she had to do to get us into St. Mark's.
Okay. Do either of you celebrate Mexican culture, history?
No, I never do anything about that, and I don't think any, like Cinco de Mayo, I believe that was promoted by businesses like taverns, you know, to get the customer in, because we never did anything. I mean, not me, but the older people, they never celebrated stuff. They were too busy to making a living. Now, everything you hear is culture this and culture that. I never knew anything about that stuff, you know. It just never happened.
Well, the only thing I celebrate is, you know, growing up, I watched my mother cooking, and so that's about the only cultural thing that I follow is I know a lot of the recipes she made, and I still make them to this day.
Okay. Do you get together with your other family members? Are they still around?
They're all dead. Everybody's dead. This left is our family. My Uncle Art's family, I don't know, half of them are dead now, you know. And the rest are scattered all over the world. I don't know where they're at.
You made other Mexican friends, or other friends, I'm sure. Do you see any of them?
I didn't have any Mexican friends.
Well, even as you grew older and more Mexicans came into the community, did you?
No,
No?
I never had anything to do with anybody, you know.
Okay.
Only ones were, like I say, Wesley Andrade's family. Even then, they moved into a neighborhood over there on 33rd Avenue, pretty close to the KD tracks there. And my friends lived right there in that neighborhood. I lived across the other side of the tracks, and I'd come over and I'd pass by their house, and we'd fool around with each other. We knew each other, you know.
Mm-hmm. But not today. There's no one that you see, get together with, share stories. No.
No. I worked with a few other Mexican men at the police department, but we were friends, but we never really did much together.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if I should even say anything about this kid that got shot by the cop. I saw that video. I don't even want to talk about that. There was a Mexican that did the shooting. It was a disgusting crime.
Well, thank you for talking with me today.
Well, it's been a pleasure.
Thanks for having us.
All right.